All right, we are live, and we are joined today by concept artist Jad Saber. Thank you very much, Jad, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Jaren. That's
Awesome. Yeah,
make
so
a joke about it.
if this is your first time joining us on YouTube, we do these interviews with artists and designers in the community, and we get a deeper look at their work and their journey and try and learn something. Like I've messaged here in the chat, if any of you have questions for myself or for Jad during the live, feel free to ask. I'll be keeping my eye on those and I'll try and shoot them over as best as I can. But yeah, so today we're going to be looking at Jad's work, and he's going to share with us his journey, talking about some of his workflows and how he operates and does his work. And I won't speak too much more for Jad, but just to give you a little bit of background on myself. My name is Jaron Dorman, and I'm the design community manager at Gravity Sketch. So I'm the one that's talking to all of you online and answering your questions. And so feel free to send us a message, and we'll try and help you out if you're having any issues with things. But without further ado, I'll send it over to Jad. Jad, if you want to share just a little bit about who you are and some of your background.
Yes, definitely. So I'm a Lebanese concept artist, and I'm based in Paris. And I've been working in the concept arts, in the entertainment industry as a concept artist for a while now. And I've worked on a multitude of video game projects, most notably The Last of Us Part 2 and Uncharted Lost Legacy, as a part of the One Pixel Brush team. And right now I'm working on films recently. I switched from video game to films, and I can't unfortunately say what I'm working on. And I am also teaching in a school in Paris here called New Edge. So they teach, game art and VFX, and they recently started a new section, which is concept art.
Very nice. That's
And
awesome.
I'm giving the occasional class there from time to time. They have amazing teachers, Jama, Eitan, Florent, Lebovin, and all those guys. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, again, I'm super happy to have you here today. I've been personally following your work for some time now. I know that I know that also the Gravity Sketch team has followed some of your work because you've worked with Gravity Sketch a little bit.
Yeah.
But you definitely have like a great really a workflow going from 3D to 2D, and really have seemed to hone in your skills really well,
Yeah.
using those tools of not letting the 3D look so 3D in your final work. It looks very painterly as we're going to see, and so that would be I'd love to hear your process of how you get to that level.
Yeah, there was a time, when concept art was only done using 2D techniques, mainly drawing and painting, and then they would, give these drawings and paintings to the 3D team, which would make models out of those and then go to animation, all this stuff. But that has drastically changed over time because, the more 3D became accessible and fast to use, all these softwares now they're just so accessible, and you can build roughly a 3D project very fast without being like too technical and, optimizing the model to be game ready. But you can quickly do some modeling, and you can quickly learn the software on YouTube, on Gumroad. You can find tutorials. So it quickly became part of the concept art workflow, even if, in our job, the end goal is to make usually a 2D image to give as a reference for the 3D artist. But using whatever software you can to get there has actually became like a industry standard, if you will. So basically, whatever 3D software I can learn, if, whenever I have a problem to solve, I need to make a certain image, I will just look for the easiest, not easiest, but easiest in the sense of what's the fastest, what's the most efficient way for me, what software can I use, what part of what software can I use to get, to solve the problem. So this is becoming more and more industry standard. The more softwares you know, the more easily you can solve the problem. The more tools you have at your disposal.
And as far as I understand, in the world of concept art, I mean, I know that this is probably a factor in really any design in our industry, but especially in concept art, I mean, speed is the name of the game. And so,
Yeah, well, that's yeah. In a general sense, that is true. Especially now that I'm working in film, I've noticed you have to be so much faster because when I was working on Last of Us, you had to be fast, but you still had enough time. Like we used to have like let's say 3 to 5 days, maybe sometimes, to make one image, right? And it was mostly for me. It was mostly environments and sometimes cinematic keyframes, and you would have like 3 to 5 days, so you could build your model maybe in one day. Maybe sometimes you could take 2 days to build your model, and then you would do a render and go to Photoshop to add more and more stuff, do some tweaks to the lighting, etc. But now that I started working on film, it's really fast. Every day you have to produce something. They usually like to, production designers to see
wow.
something every day that they can work with. So you really have to kind of change your workflow a little bit just to adapt and be fast enough to keep up.
What, just out of curiosity, what sort of timelines have you been working with in film? Like, what if you could give us an example of how quickly you'd have to turn something over?
So right now, like basically you have to turn every day, you have to turn 1 or 2 shots, like a concept every day. So it also depends on the phase of the project. If it's pre-production and you have to, there's always the pre-production phase where there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of brainstorming. They allow you to do, to be creative and do a lot of things your way sometimes. So you just keep churning out images, and during that phase, you would have to do like one concept per day, for example. But when it gets to a later phase of production where they are building sets and stuff like that, sometimes you will make the image, in one day or whatever, and then you will have feedback every day, so you can actually, fix whatever they need to fix in order for them to build a set and, just make the movie. So it really depends on the phase of, if it's pre-production, production, or post-production. So that also changes, the rhythm and the pace at which you have to work.
Um, well, before we get into some of your work and some of your workflow, I would love to know, and I think people watching would love to know how you got to where you are now. What was your journey in discovering design and realizing that you wanted to be a
Yeah,
designer, be an artist, and getting to where you are now?
it was actually pretty tough, to be honest, for me to get here, especially since I come from Lebanon, from the Middle East, and I've been in Europe for like 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
So it was a long and arduous road, to be honest. And so if I want to start from the beginning, from the very beginning, what actually got me interested as a kid, I just started copying these Dragon Ball. I used to love the Dragon Ball manga, and I was just copying the drawings from there. And slowly, I started getting better. And then life happened, and I went to college. I have a bachelor in business administration, a degree in business administration, and I have a degree in sports. Like physical preparation and training. So I did that, and then at some point I was like, I was doing an internship at the bank, and I realized like, what the hell am I doing? This is not what I want to do. And I was good at drawing at some point. Maybe I should take that up again. So I found an online school that teaches that. It was called TAD at the time. I know Jama went there as well. I remember seeing his work at the time. And I took some online classes there, and I started discovering new things. I learned about values, about shapes, about stuff that I just didn't know. I used to do these line drawings on paper. And so
Yeah.
I discovered a whole new world of drawing and painting with shapes and with values and designing. So I started really getting into that. And for a few years, I was completely focused on that. I wasn't doing anything else. You know, I was barely going out, barely. I used to play a lot of video games and stuff like that. So I stopped all of this for like 2.5 years. I took these online classes, and after that, it took me like 2 or 3 more years of practice by myself. So in total, I would say like 5 years to actually get to a decent level where I can work in the industry. And at a certain point in time, so it was very complicated for me to actually work in Europe because I'm Lebanese and, you know, I don't have a work permit. You need a work permit. You need to get sponsored by a company. So
Right.
at some point I was getting hired, and then it would tell me, yeah, but we cannot really sponsor you because for a junior position, actually to hire, when they have to hire someone from outside, they have to prove that they looked in the country itself and they couldn't find anyone with the same skills. So they went looking outside, right? And they don't usually do that for junior positions because obviously they can find someone who can replace you. So tough luck for you, right? But for a senior position, it's a bit different because, you know, they have more, how do you say, like more arguments to prove that they need you and not someone from the country. So long story short, at the end, I just, you know, I went to France, I made an internship, and then I had to go back to Lebanon, and I was applying to companies. They were saying yes, and then 1 week later, sorry, we can't take you because you don't have a work permit. And at the end, I was just mailing Shadi Safadi, you know, from One Pixel Brush, and he loved my work. And I started working with him. And at the same time, I found out that I could do like a special talent visa, you know, at the embassy, which I applied for, and it worked. So I came to Europe and I started working with Shadi, and everything went better from then on. And for me, it was important to actually be here because there is no work, you know, in that industry in Lebanon or in the Middle East, like especially the entertainment industry, even design work, industrial design. There's really not much of it there. So I had to move, you know, either to the States or to Europe or whatever, wherever go. Yeah,
That's
so
amazing. I find that such a amazing and cool story about how you just like weren't even really doing you know, design and art like in school and doing these other things, and then you just completely turned it around. And I feel like most people have some sort of interest in design or art or something, but you know, and they get off track, but they never think they can go back again. But you sort of looked back and said, what, like, you know, let's try that again and see where that goes. And I just find that really inspirational, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's really that, you know, there's always a turning point where there's a lot of indirect reasons, and then there's a direct reason. And for me, it was, I guess, when I was doing that internship, you know, at the bank, I really realized like there is no way I'm gonna do that for the rest of my life, you know, and I had to do something about it. And this is where I just decided that, you know, I needed to change, and it took time. It takes time. It's not, I can't say that it was easy, but I guess if you know, invest enough time in it, and if you like it enough, because obviously to be good at something, and you have to like it, you have to enjoy it, because if you don't, you're not going to produce good work, in my opinion, at least, you know.
That's
this is
that's true. That's some wise words. Yeah, I will echo those words because I've had similar experiences in my life, and it's just like you have to go after what you're passionate about. You know, I mean,
you have majored in industrial design, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and you know, if you don't go for those things, you know, then what's the point? You know, and I understand that some people have to you know, make ends meet and things like that, and make things happen, but I really think there is a truth to pursuing your passions. You know, it will play out and work out at the end. You just have to keep pressing.
I mean, there's always a way, you know, like, for example, when I first started out, I you know, I didn't have money, but what I used to do was I was still back in Lebanon, and I was doing these storyboards for commercials, you know, and I was getting paid for that. It wasn't huge, but it allowed me to get by and to have some more time to practice, and, you know, to learn software, to learn some concept art techniques or whatever, to learn how to do images and how to design. So there's always a way, I guess, to use what you have learned so far and maybe make some money out of it in order to go further. But you need to have that will to go further, you know, otherwise you will just stall and remain where you are.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, if you don't have that, I think what you said there, if you don't have that drive, if you don't enjoy it, then you won't get out of it. You won't produce what you need to
Yeah.
produce out of it. I mean, it won't be quality. You know, you won't enjoy it. And that means other people, you know, they'll see that through your work. And so, like, getting down to that essence of what you enjoy and what really gets your blood flowing is kind of like the ultimate discovery,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
ultimate journey. I feel like. Well, I love that story, and thank you for sharing that with us. I think a lot of people can relate to pursuing your passion, you know, or on this, you know, being on a track that they feel like they might be off track in their life. So I hope it's encouraging to people listening and watching, you know, that
Yeah,
you know,
I do as well.
pursue your passions. You know, go after those things. You know, uh, you have those in you for a reason. You know, you have something to offer to the world. You know. Um, so, well, I'm very curious, and I know that people watching are also very curious, sort of how um, you know, how you work and do some of your work.
Yeah.
Is there, let's see, I want to first, before you get into it, I just want to ask you, because obviously you've worked in VR, you've done some VR work. How do you
Yeah.
see VR changing the way we create and express ideas in the concept art? You know, since that's the industry that you worked in.
Yeah, well, the first time that I had an experience with VR was like, I think a bit more than 1 year ago. You know, I was seeing Jama and, you know, all these guys working with it and showing us, you know, these amazing designs. But it was really when I actually put on the headset, it was at the school, you know, Aurélien, the guy who actually created the concept art section at the New Age School in Paris. He, you know, he was working with VR already and he gave me this headset and I was really like, it's really something else when you actually put the headset and experience the software for Gravity Sketch, for example. It was, I think, the first thing you made me try. It's really something else than when you look at a video of someone doing it, you know, and actually trying it yourself. And I think the most amazing thing for me is just to have that feeling where you're working with your hands, you know, as if you're just, you know, with your hands, you're grabbing a thing instead of with moving things with the mouse and with a
Yeah.
gizmo. In a 3D software, you're actually just grabbing things and putting them where you want them to be, you know, and then the scale of things is also impressive. Like if you're doing a car or, you know, a certain vehicle that you can sit inside and you can just scale it and be as physically inside of it, and then you can start design whatever is around you and everything is to your scale. I think this was the most impressive thing for me. And I really find it really interesting how today, you know, how they, like for the Mandalorian, for example, they were just physically going, I mean, in VR, not physically, but the director would put on a VR headset and he would just walk around the set in VR and decide where it could be an interesting composition and stuff like that. And I think that's really amazing, and it will keep on evolving
Yeah.
further.
All those reasons you said, it's I would say same thing for me, and I would also say that it's put the fun back into working in 3D because,
Yeah,
and you kind of said it there. You know, you're working with your hands. Sort of
yeah,
that hand to object interaction is so rewarding, and you know, even though it's VR, it's kind of a digital experience. It's still giving you, I feel like that more
it's just the
intimate.
less technical it
Yeah,
is, right? The less technical it
yeah,
is, the more fun it will be, right? Instead of
yeah.
moving, you know, the mouse and the gizmos, you're just doing things with your hand. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll let you search some of your stuff. So we wanted to keep this kind of open and casual for people watching. So um, Jad, I know you have some work that you have to show. I believe most of the kind of work that you do is environment work. Is that correct? And some vehicles as well.
Yeah, vehicles. It's something that I do more in my spare time, and I could do it professionally. I think, you know, I just hadn't had I guess, the opportunity yet because, you know, I've been working on Last of Us 2. It took like 4 years or something.
Hmm.
I was working for 4 years on that project, And after that, so now I started working on a film. No vehicles, like so far. Mostly, I did some prop design, but vehicles, it's just something that I did so far, just for my my personal work.
Would you want to work more on vehicles in professional projects, or is that kind of just
Yeah,
something you want to
I
do on the
think I
side?
would. I've been enjoying learning more about cars and vehicles in general. And I actually bought this. Let me show you this book that Scott Robertson actually
Oh yeah,
uh, recommends. H Point, you
it's a
know it
great book.
already. It's pretty technical, and sometimes it's a bit hard to read with all the detail and
Yeah,
But I think it teaches you a lot about cars, about why certain things are designed in that way. Like because as you know, like we always say, form follows function. So everything has a purpose of why it looks that way. So I really enjoyed learning a few things, and also let me show you this. I have a few drawings here. So I've been drawing a lot of cars recently. Just traditional
oh
with
nice.
I don't know if you can see. Like my goal is not really to show you individually each drawing, but just to say that there's a lot of work that is being put in here,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think it allows me to learn about shapes, about cars in general, and I can't wait to get back to Gravity Sketch. I don't have as I've told you, I actually sold my VR headset to buy. I had an Oculus Rift, and I wanted to buy just the Rift S. But now that the Quest 2 is here, I'm gonna buy that. I mean, they're not producing Rifts anymore,
Yeah.
and I can't wait. After all, when I started doing all these drawings, this was right after I sold the headset, and now that I've had so much practice, I can't wait to actually get back into VR, and try. Like I want to test it out and see what I can produce now.
Yeah.
But I just give myself some time to train traditionally and up these traditional drawing skills and these design skills.
Yeah, those are beautiful. I mean, you didn't get too close up, but I mean, even just like the
Yeah,
the
I
distance
mean,
that I could see, they looked amazing.
yeah, I mean, if people are interested, they can check them on. I'm usually posting them on my Instagram account, so you can check them here if you
Yeah.
want.
By the way, it's something I've meant to mention that anybody watching, we've also linked to Jad's Artstation and his Instagram in the description. So please go check out his work. Um, well, Jad, if you want to share some of your work or screen share, maybe some of the stuff you did on, I think Last of Us or Uncharted or either one, and if you
Yeah.
maybe want to talk about some of your I think specifically your process of using 3D and using that as like a base for your 2D paintings.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, every image is a bit different, but let me share here. I'm just gonna go directly to my ArtStation. I think it's the easiest way instead of
Sure, yeah,
delving into these folders on my PC and getting
yeah.
lost.
No, I understand. I understand the file maze. That can occur.
It says that you disabled participant screen sharing. I think
Oh
you have
yeah,
to
let me take care of that real quick. There we go. You should be able to do it now.
Right, thanks. Yes. So if I share the entire screen. All right, can you see it?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, so here's my ArtStation profile, and I have a lot of Last of Us images in there. And I think what's interesting to talk about would be how at the beginning, so about 4 years ago, let me see what image. It's the cemetery one that I want to open up. I can't find it for some reason. Oh, it's here. So what's interesting is that, so you see this image, it looks pretty photorealistic, right? Pretty
Yeah,
finished, almost like you could call it a matte painting if you want.
yeah,
And it's funny because for Last of Us, the concept art style was pretty much in between concept art and matte painting. It was very, very much pushed to the limit in terms of photorealism. And that is because the game, as you may well already know, it's very visual and very cinematic. So the 3D artist needed this kind of reference where the lighting is on point and everything is really on point in terms of cinematography and photorealism.
yeah.
So these two images, what I want to show you is these 3D models that I have, and it's funny because they are so basic, right? Like it doesn't, if you go from this one, so this one was for this one, right? It's the same image. I
Wow.
just had one stupid tree here. At the time, I barely knew how to, like, I knew I was starting to learn how to use 3D. I knew how to use it a little bit. And I was just using it to establish a perspective and a little bit the lighting, but it was pretty basic, and the majority of the work was done in Photoshop. So obviously you need to have good knowledge of lighting and shapes, you know, how to compose shapes in a way that's going to lead the eye in an interesting way to the viewer,
Yeah.
have a clear focal point, all these things. So you have to have a knowledge of this. And I was just using 3D as a basic base, let's say, and this one also the base for the other one. And as time went by, we started to use, let me move this here. We started to use 3D more and more, and it became much more complex. And we were realizing, like, the better PC you have, and the better the PC you have, and the more you can actually dive into 3D, the more you realize that it gives you a lot of creative options. Like you can move the camera like a director, you know, in your scene. You can choose the shot that you want. You can create the lighting that you want. And so we started bit by bit, you know, going more into detail with the 3D. So if I open up this image, for example, I don't think I have the 3D base here, but this is maybe 75 or 80% 3D, you know, whereas the other one was like maybe 10% or 15%.
Wow.
And every image is a problem to solve on its own. For
Yeah.
this one, I remember we had to find, I was working with my teammates, you know, Florent Lebrun, you know, and Donald Warrior. So we found an add-on for Blender where you can actually import a model from Google Earth. You know, you can just go to Google Earth and import the mesh from Google Earth. So we did that, and you can actually get some textures with it from Google Earth, and it gives you a base to start with, and then you start kit bashing some more detailed building until you get the detail that you want.
Wow, that's super cool.
But yeah, I mean, it was fun. Just for every different image, you have to figure out, you know, like how to solve the problem. That's the job of a concept artist, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I mean, even though you might be working in the same, you know, the same IP, every keyframe has a different set of problems to solve. It has different objects in it, different camera angle completely changes what's being shown, and therefore you have to figure out the best way to show those things.
Exactly. If it's an interior, if it's an exterior, if it has this one, for example, you know, it has a whale. So how will you? Actually, this one was sent to me like this. Now I remember from Naughty Dog. So I didn't actually make the whale, but let's say you had to make it, right? It's an organic, it's an animal, right? So you would have to use a sculpting program, maybe like I don't know, ZBrush or something like that. So what kind of software would you use? You know, you have to figure all these things out. This is why I think there's a kind of like multitude of softwares that you have to know in order to be able to do everything, right? Which is, one of them is a general 3D software like Blender or 3ds Max, where you can make the scene, you can make the layout, you can render inside of it. One of them would be a sculpt program like ZBrush or maybe 3D Coat or something like that. And eventually I would like to learn also a CAD. I haven't yet done that. A CAD program like, you know, Moi 3D or Fusion 3D. So all of those come in handy, and I think it would be really good to
if
know.
If you're interested, we actually did an interview with Ryan Sepper, and he's a concept designer, and he's did his design in Fusion 360, and then finished the final design in Fusion. He created his design in Gravity Sketch and then finished it in Fusion. It was pretty cool workflow. But yeah, it's fascinating to see, you know, your work, and it's really, it makes a lot of sense when you say that it kind of changes each image. You know, how much there's 3D and how much is painting, how much is sort of like photo bashing and things like that. Do you do a lot of photo bashing for your paintings, or is it?
Well, for example, the cemetery one that I showed just before, because this 3D was just like 10 or 15%, then all the rest was, you know, photo bashing. You had to push it with photos.
Yeah.
But this one, on the contrary, is like maybe 85 or 90% 3D, and then I will just add, these graffiti elements, all of this, I will just add it with Photoshop. But even the little pieces of trash here, the cardboard, the bottle, the cans, are objects that I got from Quixel Megascans, and I'm just adding here to complete my scene. Some cars I would go on the internet, on Sketchfab, on whatever site I can find to download models, and then I'll paint over them just a little bit to change them, just make them maybe more sci-fi or whatever I need them
I
to
think
be.
what people also miss with work like this is, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts on this, is they see the elements, right? That you're talking about. You talk about, photo bashing, 3D, getting models off the internet, and people can think, oh, that's all I got to do is get all these elements together, and I've got, I've got a
Yeah,
painting that will look like this. But what people miss is actually what is really pulling these images together so well is your understanding of fundamentals. So
exactly,
your
exactly.
understanding of
So
lighting, framing, color,
yeah,
all those things. High amounts of detail versus not very much detail in key areas. Focusing your eye. If you could talk about just the importance of fundamentals, I know that's a really important
exactly.
thing.
So I actually have a lecture that I'm giving like a lecture, a presentation that I'm giving to my students at New Edge. And, it's a part of a lecture that I was going to do at a workshop that got canceled because of COVID. And
Oh,
in this
sorry to hear that.
lecture, I'm actually talking, yeah, like I have a diagram, which is pretty interesting. It's like it has like 5 columns, which in each column there's a name of a foundation skill written, like perspective and light and form, color theory, composition. And then at the end, like these columns are holding one thing, one triangle. And I just wrote the word design in this triangle, just to say that in order to have strong design and to make a strong design, all of these columns need to be strong and need to hold, they're the foundations of what's on top. So if you don't know about composition or how to compose good shapes, how to make the shapes work together, these design rules that we're usually using, like 1/3, 2/3, how to where to concentrate your detail, have an area to rest, and then one specific area where there is more detail. For example, this building here, it's the same. All this part here is the same, and then this part is different, and it's like 1/3, 2/3. So it kind of gives an area of visual interest. Here, you have this sign, you have these two signs, you have these variations here, you have these kind of like pipes or whatever. Same thing for this building, right? You have all this area here and all this area down there, which are pretty similar. And they are, let's say, the 2/3, and then you have the 1/3 here, which is kind of like the focal point, if you want, of this particular building. And then for the image, in the general sense, you also have this, small area where you have more details. So here with the light, I'm directing the light on this area specifically because I wanted the viewer to look here, right? And then you can wander off the image and see everything else. But I always want to direct the viewer's eye to a specific place. And this is basically what they do in movies. You have cinematic shots where they want to direct the viewer's eye to a focal point. What's happening in this cinematic shot? Something's happening. And we don't want the viewer to wander off and look at this corner, right? If I place
Yeah.
the strongest contrast of my image here, that would be stupid. So
So,
basically, yeah.
well, I'd like to know. So, what's your process for putting together these compositions? Are you? I would assume it's a combination, depending on the image you're doing. Um, are you doing thumbnails, like black and white thumbnails, or are you just going in straight into 3D and finding a camera angle? What's your process for finding compositions that work?
It's like you said, it really depends on the image. So these are the types of thumbnail compositions that you're talking about. So these, I'm not doing them this much anymore. I used to do them a lot. It's a great exercise, by the way, to get better with composition and with shapes. But nowadays, most of the time, I would be starting with 3D, with a 3D mockup, and just work on top of that. But funny enough, even when you start with 3D, sometimes, I would just pause on my 3D scene, I would take a screenshot and I would take it to Photoshop. I would make it small, just like these thumbnails here, and I would start scribbling on top just to figure out, because sometimes 3D is too rigid, right? It can,
Yeah.
especially if you're working, as we were saying before, like technically in a technical software where you have a gizmo and stuff like that. So in VR, this will probably change, and it's more organic and more how do you say, like less technical, so you can actually be more free and do the shapes that you want. But I always find it useful to zoom out in your image like this and see the composition from a certain distance. That allows you to see where the focal point is, how the shapes are working, if everything is working. So even when I start with 3D, I would just sometimes take a screenshot and zoom out and figure it out. But it really depends on the image. If sometimes you can even start from a photo plate. So if you're making a concept of something that exists in reality in a certain town or country, and you have a great photo that has the right perspective that you need, you can base it off of that photo, and it will get you maybe 70% of the way, and you just have to add some few things on top in 3D to get the work done, right? So that's also a viable option. It really depends on what you need to achieve and how much time you have and all these things.
Yeah.
But anyway, a good way, I would say,
That makes a lot of sense. And you were saying that mostly now you do kind of 3D, and it seems that it's you've almost gotten to a place now. You could almost say you've gotten to a place where you know what is going to work in a 3D scene compositionally, so you don't necessarily have to go to that black and white painting level.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, experience helps a lot. That's for sure. And experience helps a lot. And I would like to just say that, and as a general rule, I think it helps even if you don't go to Photoshop. But if you just do that, on an image and zoom out and look at it from afar, it always helps to see the big shapes, because this is what makes the composition. Then, of course, within all these big shapes, so within, let's say, this shape here, you have some smaller shapes. Within this shape, you have some smaller shapes. These also have to be designed. So for Last of Us, we were more like designing on the how do you say, like when you do hard surface design, you're designing, or industrial design, you're designing the product itself. You're designing, I don't know, a vehicle, a prop. How does it work? How does it look like? What are its functionalities that will determine its form, right? Here we are designing something that already exists, but I'm not creating something new, right? Maybe, especially when I show you these areas from Seattle, I don't know, like this already exists in real life, but I'm designing the destruction of it. How would it look like if it's destroyed? How would the greenery look like if it, took over the ruins of what is left here from this highway, from this overpass? What interesting shapes can I come up with, with the vegetation, so that when the player actually sees this, he won't just see an overpass with vegetation, but, there's a beauty in it, actually, in destruction and nature overtaking the city again. But you have to actually depict that beauty in a certain way. Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting or appealing to the eye. So there's design in that as well. And yeah, I forgot how we started on this topic, but
No, it's great though.
I'm not sure where I'm getting at, but yeah.
It's really great information, and I know that people are loving it. I'm curious, how long does it take for you to make, say, an image like this? I think, or to this level of finality.
So for these images, I think it was going from 3 to 5 days. Usually in 2 to 3 days, you can get something done. But then you start, having feedback either from your art director or from your colleagues, and you keep pushing it to get that extra quality. Because it could be a very good image, but if you want to make it amazing, I think this, it always helps to ask for feedback from your colleagues and have an exterior eye looking at your image, an exterior opinion, because after working on it on the same image for 2-3 days, sometimes you kind of get stuck. You might make a good job out of it, but what's for certain and what's helped me a lot is just asking for feedback, especially from people who know their craft and who know what they're doing and who do the same thing you do, right? it also helps to ask for feedback from people who don't do the same thing. And sometimes I would just ask my girlfriend, like what do you think of that? Like, can you actually understand what you're seeing here? Is this readable? And directly from her impression, I can understand if what I'm doing is readable to the eye, or if it works or if it doesn't. So yeah, feedback is important both ways, from people who who do the same thing as you, who are professionals, and from people who are not as well. It could be valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Getting that feedback is super important. It helps hone in on if something is working or not. I know that some images and things that I've worked on personally, you get so ingrained into it, and you almost are too familiar with the image that you're making, and you're not seeing some of the kind of the clear mistakes that you might be making, and showing it to someone else, just kind of having some fresh eyes on it, cuts through that sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah. For this vegetation that you also have here, all the leaves and everything, where are you getting some of these? These, because it looks like it's photo bash, but it looks very natural. The way you've integrated it into your scene. Where are you getting some of these photo assets from?
Well, the thing is, the key to this is just spending a lot of time, really a huge amount, a good amount of time finding the perfect reference, because I could find like a random photo of some vines growing and try to put them in my image. But if they don't match perspective wise and lighting wise, and even we were even looking at how blurry the image is, if it's too blurry or if it's too grainy, and the rest of my image isn't, then it's not going to fit correctly. Now, of course, there is a few tweaks that you can do in Photoshop, like the surface blur or smart blur, Gaussian blur. I don't know if you've tried those. Or you can actually make it sharper if it's too blurry. So you can actually alter it a bit, but it's always better to find a perfect photo, at least if you're willing to achieve that kind of quality. We were really spending a good amount of time finding high-res photos from the correct perspective, usually that have the same lighting from the lighting that I need in my image. Sometimes if it has, usually if it's overcast, if the lighting is overcast and there is no direct sunlight, you can add the direct sunlight on Photoshop. But if there is direct sunlight on a photo and in your image there isn't, it's hard to remove the direct sunlight and make it fit your image. So I would say usually try to look for images that don't have direct sunlight on them and just cut them out. We would cut them out. And let me show you actually how we would proceed. So we call these alphas, right? And I had a whole bunch of those. So you just cut them out and you save them on a PSD or a TIFF file like this, and then you can just grab some of them, whatever you need, and start playing with them. I say playing with them. I guess the word playing works more for these black and white compositions that I was showing you before, but when you're actually nearing a finish of the image, you're not really playing, but more finding the exact reference that you need for, whatever part of the image you're working on. So yeah.
This is also a really smart way to work that I'm noticing here, that you've got this whole library of just, shapes that you can just take from and making your work in the future much quicker and faster.
Yeah, that helps in 2D in Photoshop and also in 3D. You have to. I think it's important to build a library of assets, whether you're using ZBrush or Gravity Sketch or Blender. In Blender you have some add-ons, I know, like asset management. You can just store the assets, and eventually when you're doing professional work, this will save you a lot of time. You can just grab assets and work directly instead of every time file, import, OBJ, and you have to put the texture on and all that stuff.
Let me just look through some of the comments here as well and make sure I'm not missing anything. It looks like a lot of this is great, awesome, love your work. Not too many questions, but I'm glad everybody's enjoying it. I want to ask you sort of like your what were some of your influences when finding sort of your style and doing some of your work. What were there some key artists and designers that kind of propelled you in your work going through your career?
Yeah, of course, but it's also the work itself that kind of how do you say, directs you towards a certain style or another.
Hmm.
So I was looking a lot at Jamie Jones, at Craig Mullins. They have a more painterly style, and I love that. I used to love that. I still do. But when I started working on The Last of Us, I didn't have this realistic style, photorealistic style. I guess my work was more looking like, kind of like this. It wasn't that good at the time, I guess, but I was painting a lot. I didn't have a lot of. I had a little bit of knowledge of lighting and stuff like that, but of course not as much as I do now after working 4 years on a game like that. So it's really the work itself that kind of made me change my style. So I learned a lot of it from John Sweeney and from Florent Lebrun, who was my colleague at One Pixel Brush. And because Florent was also a matte painter for like 7 years, he worked, on movies. He worked on Harry Potter, on X-Men, on Game of Thrones, on a lot of stuff. And for him, it was easy to use his matte painting skills because he already had them to do concept art. So he was really, he helped me out a lot in the beginning, to teach me all these techniques, especially in Photoshop, how to integrate images together, and how to all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was more the work. And I could also say the same for if you would ask me. I don't know, you didn't ask me this, but I'm gonna ask the question to myself.
Sure, go ahead.
So, like, for example, what got me into environments or characters, or because I do more environments than characters. Let's say, why environments and not characters or whatever. So again, it's the work itself that just led me. Like at the time, I didn't mind. I was just looking for work. I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I loved video games. I loved films, and I was just, my dream was, okay, I need to work in this industry. And just because I contacted Shadi at the time from One Pixel Brush, and he was specialized in environments, and he took me in. So I ended up just doing environments for like 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and that just got me way better in environments than something else, and environments and cinematic keyframes and stuff like that. So it's just sometimes it's just the work that leads you somewhere, and then once you become good enough, I guess, at something, you can spend more time on getting good at something else if you enjoy doing characters as well, or props.
Yeah.
Just like I'm doing all these scars. I haven't done any of that professionally, but because my professional work allows me to get decent pay and I have enough time, I can actually focus on learning something else. And now I'm not boasting or anything, but I'm pretty sure I can work, doing vehicles and stuff like that as well for the industry.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at your style and the way that, your understanding of lighting and environments, I can't wait to see you do some more vehicle stuff as well. Obviously those little bits that you were showing were super cool. But that makes sense, that you're, the journey, the kind of the work and doing the work and doing the projects kind of reveal themselves to you as far as your style and what areas you want to focus more on. And of course there are some artist influences, here and there, but what you said really makes sense, that, your own journey, and if you're reflective on your journey and the work that you're doing, that'll inform you just naturally.
Yeah, and then in a more artistic, from a more artistic point of view, I would just advise people not to worry a lot about their styles, because I'm talking more with people who are aspiring concept artists.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry a lot about your style for now, but just from the people that you admire, try to take, if you take something that you admire from Jamie Jones, or something else that you admire from, I don't know, Paul Chadesson or whatever. Maybe I like how Paul does his spaceships, or maybe I like the brushstrokes of Jamie Jones, and I try to apply that to my work. So every little bit from here and there, and then eventually your style will be formed by itself. But you don't really have to worry about that a lot, I'd say.
Yeah, that's something that that I've heard. I don't remember who else I was listening to, but as far as finding your style, like what you were just talking about, and somebody actually just asked that question, so thank you for answering that. Um,
Yeah.
that you you just as an individual already bring a uniqueness to whatever you're doing because you are. This is getting a little philosophical, but you are you, right? And so as you learn art, as you learn the fundamentals and the style, and you get those down, and those become second nature, your individual interests will feed into that style, your individual style, and it will just come out of you basically.
I mean, you have your own experiences. You've lived your own life. You know,
Yeah,
you've seen things that you've seen yourself specifically. So, as you're saying, it will automatically bring
yeah,
that to the table.
and you know, a lot of people think that they need to somehow curate or invent this, you know, this style. You know, they look at
Yeah.
all these artists. You know, they look at Jad Saber, they look at Craig Mullins, they look at all these people, and they're like, I got to figure out what my style is, and they don't realize that they just arrived there from their
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah,
That's very true. And you would actually benefit at the beginning. I would say you would benefit from not copying exactly the work of someone else, but copying a style maybe. Why not? If you're looking for
yeah,
work, if you're, you know, a young student or whatever, and you just graduated, you're looking for work, you need to get good very fast. It doesn't matter if you copy the style of someone. If his style works for the industry and you can get work out of doing that, I'm not saying to be a copycat, but you know, if you can take a shortcut, if you look at, I don't know, Eitan's work or Florent's work, and you
mm.
try to understand what he did to get there or what softwares he's using, what he's doing, and you try to emulate what he's doing, odds are you're going to get much more chances of getting a job than someone who's just trying to make it his own way because he wants to different style than everybody. You know, that's going to take him 10 years maybe. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really insightful. It makes a lot of sense because in the beginning, you just want to you want to create. It's almost like in the beginning, you just want to make sure you're creating good art. Like you want to create, you want to make sure the fundamentals are there. You're communicating your idea, your concept in a beautiful, pleasing way. And as you just
Yeah,
said, your experiences, you'll find that unique style later in your life. You know, at different.
totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's see here. I'm seeing some comments coming in, but I guess it's people just saying that you've inspired. Someone says I'm working in Autodesk Alias currently, but you've inspired me to have some fun in Photoshop. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
Photoshop's always fun. Yeah.
yeah, is that your primary 2D tool outside of you know, when you
Yeah.
go from 3D, you just go to
And
Photoshop?
I was really going recently doing images where I'm going like I'm pushing the 3D, you know, the furthest that I can, maybe 80%, 90% 3D, and then just a little bit in Photoshop. But now that I'm working on a film, and I have to be much faster, as I was saying, so I've been getting more back into Photoshop. Sometimes I'm just doing like, you know, 40, 50%, let's say, in 3D, and then just photo bashing, just because it's faster sometimes, you know. It's if you have the right photos and you have experience doing it and you have experience finding the right photos, because the most important part I would say is not the Photoshop skills of, I mean, of course they are important, how to integrate the photo in your painting, but the harder thing is to actually find the right photo, because if you find the right photo, then, you know, applying it there is only a matter of technical, you know, execution. But the hard skill to have is finding the right photo, and this is what art directors do. Basically, they find the right references all the time. They have their job is to find the perfect references for their guys, their designers, to work. And once you find the perfect reference, then the job is almost done. You know, you just have to apply your skills to get your design.
Wow. And so one thing that I've realized as you've been talking about your process is really the careful curation and what you've just said of all the assets, the careful curation of all of those assets in your images. You know, you spend a lot of time finding that foliage, the leaves that have the correct lighting, that have even just like cans that are laying down on a street.
Yeah,
It really makes a lot of sense that people don't realize that all of these things are carefully chosen and picked
yeah,
to contribute to the story of the image.
exactly. Because if they don't contribute to the story, then I don't need them, right? I'm not just placing these, you know, cans like you were saying, or trash on the ground just to place it there. If it doesn't contribute, it has to contribute to two things basically: the story and the composition. You know, if it doesn't help the composition and it affects it negatively, then I will automatically get rid of it. And the same thing for the story. You know, it has to enhance the storytelling. It has to have it's like, what's its objective here? Does it show that this is a cyberpunk world where it's a bit trashy, you know, Acura style? Then okay, fine. It helps showing that, so it's helping my world. If it doesn't show anything, then, you know, we're not just randomly placing stuff in there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you again, Jad, for joining us. We're getting closer towards the end here. I just wanted to, I mean, I think you've been dropping a lot of wonderful insights and wisdom throughout our talk here. But if there's any final sort of bits of wisdom that you'd like to share with people watching and people that would be watching later, that you've learned in your career that you would like to share.
Yeah, I mean, invest in a good chair. You know, watch out for your health.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
You know, I've been having a lot of back problems recently. Now it's getting a lot better, thankfully. But at some point, you know, it was really bad because of sitting all day and working, you know, in a bad position. So really invest in, you know, watch out for your health. Take breaks. Take a lot of breaks. At first, you know, I was working when I was really learning. I wouldn't take any breaks. I would just sit there, even for work. When I started working, you would get obsessed with work and just sit around all day without taking any break, just wanting to finish the work, you know. And,
yeah.
But it's actually pretty important, and also it gives you a fresh eye, you know, to get off the screen and then come back.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just be careful of that.
Especially in this day and age, more than ever, it's important to get away from the desk, or at least have a good chair.
Definitely. And one other thing I would like to say is something that one of my old teachers was telling us, which is, you know, like we were asking him, how can we get into the industry? How can you set your foot into the industry if you're starting out?
Yeah.
So this is mostly advice for people who are starting out. And he would just say, just get good enough, and, you know, the work will get to you. And this actually stuck to my head. And I was, you know, for a long while after I finished my online classes, I just kept working on myself. And it actually happened this way, right? Like, at some point, just work will come to you. And there used to be a time where I was really hungry for work and please give me work. And I was asking, you know, applying everywhere. And now I'm getting more emails that I can handle. Sometimes I don't even have the time to read them, asking me, you know, for jobs. So
wow.
Again, I'm not boasting or anything, but, you know, just get good enough and the work will get to you by itself.
Really great advice. And thank you so much, Jad.
My pleasure, man. It's nice of you to have me here with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we'd love to follow up again in the future and see more of your work. If you're watching and you're not following Jad, please go follow him. He's on Instagram as well as Artstation. Are you on any other channels that you'd like people to follow you?
Follow Jaren as well. He's awesome. He does awesome designs.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and so I know that people have just enjoyed seeing your process and seeing a deep dive in your work. I've enjoyed seeing it, you know, because I've been following your work and have always been curious about
Thanks,
the details and how it just, you know, I can talk about fundamentals and art and design all day long, so it's always great talking about these things. But
awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Jad. Thank you everybody that's been joining us live. If you kind of joined us late, this will be available after it's over, and feel free to watch it from the beginning. But make sure to tune in every week. Next week we won't be here since it's Thanksgiving, but thank you everybody again for joining, and we will see you next time. And thank you, Jad.
Thank you, Jaren. Thank you, guys. See you.
All right, see ya.
Bye.